The divorce papers had been signed 11 months ago, yet it still felt unreal every time I looked at the empty side of my closet. Friends told me I should move on, start dating again, and forget everything that had happened. But moving on isn't as easy as people make it sound. Some memories refuse to let go, especially when they end without answers. That cloudy Saturday morning, I drove back to the house I once called home. I wasn't there to relive the past. I was only picking up the last box of my belongings from the garage. A few books, an old watch my father had given me, and some family photographs. At least, that's what I believed. The neighborhood looked exactly the same. Children rode bicycles across the street, sprinklers watered green lawns, and the old oak tree in the front yard still stretched its branches over the driveway. It was strange how life around the house had continued as if nothing had ever changed. I parked my car and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel tighter than I should have. My heart raced with memories I thought I'd buried. My marriage to Emily had started like a dream. We met in college, fell in love quickly, and believed we could survive anything together. For years, we laughed over burned dinners, planned vacations we couldn't afford, and dreamed about building a family. But somewhere along the way, silence replaced conversation. Trust turned into suspicion. Every discussion became an argument, and every argument pushed us farther apart. When Emily finally asked for a divorce, she only said one sentence. "I can't keep living with secrets anymore." I asked what she meant, but she never explained. No affair. No dramatic confession. Just silence. That silence haunted me for nearly a year. Taking a deep breath, I walked toward the front door. Before I could knock, it slowly opened. Standing there was my ex-wife's mother, Linda. She looked almost exactly as I remembered, neatly dressed, wearing thin glasses, with silver streaks running through her short brown hair. During my marriage, she'd always treated me kindly, almost like her own son. But today, something about her smile felt different. Not cruel. Not warm. Almost as if she had been expecting me. "I knew you'd come today," she said softly. "I just came for my things." "I know." She stepped aside, allowing me to enter. The familiar scent of lavender filled the hallway. Every picture frame, every piece of furniture, every corner reminded me of birthdays, Christmas dinners, and countless evenings that now felt like scenes from someone else's life. Emily wasn't home. Or maybe she simply didn't want to see me. Linda closed the door behind me. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Then she looked directly into my eyes, her lips curling into the faintest smirk. She leaned closer until only I could hear her. "Want to look?" My entire body froze. My mind instantly jumped to the worst conclusion. Was Emily here with someone else? Had she moved on so completely that her own mother wanted me to see it? Was this some kind of cruel joke? Linda watched the emotions flash across my face and gave a quiet laugh. "No," she whispered. "Not what you're thinking." Before I could ask another question, she slowly turned and began walking down the hallway. "Come with me." Every instinct told me to leave. Nothing good could possibly come from reopening old wounds. Yet curiosity pulled me forward. She stopped in front of a small wooden door near the end of the hallway. I recognized it immediately. The storage room. Except, during all 7 years of my marriage, that room had always remained locked. Whenever I asked about it, Emily would smile awkwardly and say, "Just old family junk." I had never questioned it again. Now Linda rested her hand on the doorknob. "I've wanted to show you this for a very long time," she said quietly. "What is it?" She looked at me with eyes full of regret. The truth. A cold chill ran down my spine. She unlocked the door with an old brass key she pulled from her pocket. The lock clicked. The door slowly creaked open. Dust floated through the sunlight streaming from a tiny window. Shelves lined every wall. Cardboard boxes. Old photo albums. Stacks of letters tied together with faded blue ribbons. And in the very center of the room sat a large wooden chest. Linda didn't say another word. She simply pointed toward it. I think, she whispered, it's finally time you saw what Emily spent years trying to hide. Linda stood beside the doorway without saying another word. The silence inside the room felt heavier than anything I had experienced during the entire divorce. My eyes slowly adjusted to the dim light as I stepped forward. Dust floated through the air, disturbed by footsteps that probably hadn't crossed this floor in years. The wooden chest in the middle of the room looked ordinary, yet something about it demanded attention. My hands trembled as I lifted the lid. Inside were dozens of photo albums, neatly stacked letters tied with blue ribbons, and several small boxes labeled with dates stretching back more than 10 years. What is all this? I asked quietly. Linda sighed. The life you never got to see. I frowned, confused. She picked up the oldest album and placed it in my hands. Open it. The first page showed Emily as a little girl, smiling beside her parents during a family vacation. I turned another page. Birthday parties. School awards. Family dinners. Nothing unusual. Then I reached a page that made me stop breathing. There was a picture of Emily standing beside me. But I had never seen that photograph before. It had been taken nearly a year before we officially met. I stared at it in disbelief. That's impossible, I whispered. Linda nodded slowly. No, it's not. She sat in an old chair near the window. You think your story with Emily began at college? It did. She shook her head. No. It began much earlier. I looked back at the photograph. It had been taken during a charity event my father had volunteered at years ago. I barely remembered attending it. Emily was standing only a few feet away from me. Neither of us was looking at the camera. Neither of us knew the other existed. Yet somehow, fate had placed us in the same moment. Linda smiled sadly. Emily found that picture years later while helping me organize family albums. She recognized you? Not immediately. But after the two of you started dating, she remembered your face. I turned another page. More photographs appeared. Different places. Different years. Somehow we had crossed paths again and again without ever realizing it. At a concert. An airport. A holiday parade. Always strangers. Always only a few steps apart. My heartbeat grew faster. It feels impossible. Sometimes life is stranger than fiction, Linda replied. Then she handed me a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon. They're all addressed to you. My hands shook. But I've never received these. You couldn't. I carefully untied the ribbon. The first letter was written in Emily's handwriting. It was dated only 3 weeks after our first date. She had written about how happy she was. About how she believed I was the person she'd been unknowingly searching for. About how scared she was of losing me. None of the letters had ever been mailed. There were dozens. Maybe hundreds. Each one captured moments of our relationship. The day we became engaged. The excitement of buying our first house. The fear she felt whenever we argued. The hope that tomorrow would be better. As I continued reading, tears blurred my vision. Why didn't she ever give me these? Linda lowered her eyes. Because writing was easier than speaking. I stayed silent. There was something Emily struggled with her entire life. Linda continued. When conversations became emotional, she shut down. She couldn't explain what she was feeling. Instead, she'd write everything down. I thought back to every argument we'd ever had. Every time I begged her to tell me what was wrong. Every moment she answered with silence. I had mistaken silence for indifference. In reality, she had been carrying entire conversations inside these letters. Linda opened another small box. Inside lay a velvet pouch. She placed it gently into my hand. I opened it. My wedding ring. The one I had thrown onto the kitchen counter the night we signed the divorce papers. I thought she kept it because she hated me, I whispered. Linda smiled sadly. No. Then why? She couldn't bring herself to let it go. A lump formed in my throat. For months I had convinced myself Emily had stopped loving me long before the divorce. Everything inside this room suggested the opposite. Then Linda handed me one final envelope. Unlike the others, it wasn't sealed. It was written the day before the divorce hearing. I unfolded the paper carefully. The first sentence shattered me. If you're reading this, it means I finally found the courage to tell you the truth, or I waited too long. She wrote that she still loved me. That fear had ruined everything. That every time she wanted to explain herself, the words disappeared. She believed I deserved someone who could communicate better than she could. Instead of asking for help, she let me walk away. By the time I reached the final line, tears rolled freely down my face. I looked at Linda. Why show me this now? She wiped away a tear of her own. Because carrying someone else's silence becomes unbearable after a while. She gently closed the chest. The truth doesn't always repair what's broken. I nodded. But sometimes. She smiled through her tears. It finally lets two hearts understand what really happened. I walked out of the house with the box of my belongings in one hand and the final letter in the other. For the first time in nearly a year, the weight inside my chest felt different. Not lighter. Just clearer. As I reached my car, my phone vibrated. One new message. From Emily. Mom finally showed you, didn't she? If you know the truth now, would you meet me one last time? I stared at the screen for several seconds. Then, without thinking twice, I smiled.